Hi, this is Austin. Today I would like to share how to generate Sudoku using VBA. We know that Sudoku uses only numbers 1 to 9. We can actually make use of the random function in VBA to generate the number randomly for all these entire 81 cells, and we add some code to make sure that all the conditions are being fulfilled, which means that after generated the numbers, we have to first look into each square and make sure that no number repeated. For those that repeated, we just have to remove and replace for a new one, and we should repeat it for the rest of the square and also each column and each row. Of course, we are not going to repeat this process for infinite number of time, because if let's say we remove and replace all over again for the entire cell, this might be time consuming and may take up to 1 hour. So what we have to do here, we can opt to select certain rows and certain column and we remove entirely, and we just have to regenerate for these rows and column. For example, we will choose to retain this and we choose to remove the entire first 3 rows and the middle 3 columns after certain time, and Excel will just regenerate all over again without changing this, and this will definitely save time because Excel don't have to repeat all over again. So after certain time, after these 2 columns are being completed, Excel will no longer change the number anymore because this is already fixed and correct. Then Excel will just rerun and replace, remove for those that are repeated for the first 3 columns. Once everything is done, is generated, then Excel will choose to remove or retain certain number according to the level of difficulty that's selected by the player. Once everything is done, the puzzle is ready, then the player can start to play. This process usually takes 2 to 3 minutes on average to generate a new puzzle, and sometimes it may take up to 4 minutes. Okay, now let's move on to the coding part. Of course, we can create a button for the player to choose the level of difficulty. So which means that we have to first design a user form, and we just have to insert the code in this command button. So we are going to learn how to write the code step by step. Before that, we have to make sure that the user form under the show model we set to false, as this is very important, otherwise some code may not be executed. Since we are using user form to record the level of difficulty, so we can first unload the user form before we start. So we will make use of the for loop to run for the option button. Option button 1 to option button 3 to check for which level is selected by the player. So we have to make sure that the numbering is in sequence, otherwise error will definitely occur. So for button 1 to 3 we check, and we will make use of the if function to check which one is being selected. So if controls, make use of the controls function so that we can make use of a dummy and run as a variable. So option button and I. So if let's say the first one, when we run I equal to 1, which means that the first option button with value equal to true, which means that selected. Once it's selected, definitely the value will be true. If not selected, the value will be false. So if let's say yes, then the level definitely according to the caption that we can see. So we can copy. If let's say we don't want to rewrite again, type again. So instead of using value, now we change to caption since we want to record the caption. And if after checking for the first button, then of course we have to move to the next. So will be next I. So this step is for us to record the level of difficulty. Then next, before we start, of course we have to bear in mind that we should unprotect. So sheet 1.cells, or we just sheet 1 unprotect. Because we have to bear in mind that once we generated the parser, we should lock the sheet because we shouldn't allow the user to change the question. So that's why we have to lock. Once locked, if we generated a new one before we can run and generate the numbers, of course we have to unprotect. If not, Excel are not able to change the value. However, sometimes let's say the user know the number and already unprotect it, then this will be an error because Excel cannot unprotect since it's already in unprotected mode. So what we have to do here, we will add one code call on arrow resume next, which means that if let's say it's already unprotected, then Excel no longer have to perform this anymore. We'll proceed to the next line. And as we can see, when the parser is generating, just now we see that there is a row, a cell showing that generating a new parser. Please wait. So we can make use of a cell to put this notice or this statement. So generating a new parser. Please wait. And we continue to, of course, we have to remove all the numbers that already done by the players order Excel. So we just remove the number range to 1.cells. We have the first column and the first row. Since this is a 9 by 9 puzzle, so first column, first row to the 9 row and the 9 column. What we have to do here is our intention is to clear the numbers. So we will clear the contains. Also, we can do the same thing for the solution that we have, which means that the number that generated by the Excel. Of course, this line is not necessarily because when Excel generate for a new puzzle, the number will be replaced accordingly. If let's say we worry that there will be some number that not change, then we just clear it. Okay, then once done, of course, we can now generate. So for I equal to 1 to 9. Since we have row and columns, so we need one random number for row and one for column. So I to represent row and J to represent column to 9. In order for us to increase the randomness, then we just make use of the randomize function before we generate using the random function. So this number should be generated on the solution part instead of the question part because for the question part we should remove certain number. So we have plus J since we start from 13. So as we can see, if let's say we start from 13, which means that for the column J, we should have 12 plus 1, which is 13. So that match. Then is equal to we want only integer. We can make use of the integer function or we can make use of the raw function. So we roll the random number. So the minimum is 1, maximum is 9. So 1 plus 8 is equal to 9. We have 0 decimal places. And we next j. So I to j, then j back to I. So this is the code for us to generate the random numbers. Next is we have to think a way to remove the repeated number for each square. So what we have to do again for I equal to 1 to 9, since we have 9 rows here, and for j equal to 1 to 9 as well, since we have 9 columns as well. Then what we have to do here, we have to bear in mind, now we want to remove the number for each square, which means that we have to compare based on the 9 square here. We cannot compare for each row and compare for each column accordingly. Then we have to take a step of 3, which means that for this particular 3 by 3 square, we have to determine is there any repeated number. So we take a step of 3 without checking for only a particular row or a particular column, but we take a square. And for this square, in this particular square, there are 3 rows and 3 columns. So we will make another for loop. So we simply take maybe like m equal to 1, 2, 3. We just have to check for 3 rows and 3 columns according to a particular square. So for n equal to 1, 2, 3 as well. And what we have to do, we can make use of the COUNTIF function. So let's say we are able to count that a particular number appears for more than one time, which means that it's repeated. So for repeated, then we have to remove. So we have to make use of the application.worksheet function, the COUNTIF function in the worksheet. So COUNTIF. So for this range here refer to the square that we are referring. So we will make use of the range function. Then sheet1.cells, we have I, then 12 plus j. So for this I and 12 plus j, so which means that the first sub-square in the square. So the first cell until the last square in the last sub-square in the square. So which means that we have to take I plus 2 because we just have to refer to each square, and each square consists of 3 by 3 sub-squares. So we have to take I plus 2 and so for the column, so j plus 2 as well. Then this is the range that we are referring. Then what we have to do, we compare to the current cell. So sheet1.cells. So for this current cell, what happened? We check. So when we run into I, we will move to j. So if let's say I refer to rows, j refer to columns, so I and j no relation, we ignore, then we will run into m or n. So if let's say m also refer to the rows, then we will have I1, m1. If we take I plus m, and we will end up with 2. However, we should start from the first row, which means that we should take I plus m minus 1. So 1 plus 1 equal to 2 minus 1 equal to 1. Then we will do the same thing for the columns as well. So the column here is 12 plus j. Then we should plus n for the columns, and also we need to minus 1. So we have 12 minus 1 is 11. We can straight away write 11 here, or we can write in this way. It doesn't matter. and now we will have the same thing. So whenever more than one means that appear more than once, then definitely is considered repeated. Therefore, those that are repeated, what we have to do, we remove the current one. So where is the current one? This is the current one. So we should remove this. To remove a particular number, we can set to null, or we can take dot clear contain. And we done. So we start with if, then we end with if. So and we go from I to j to m to n. So we should close with n, m, j, and I in the reverse basis. So this method is for us to remove the same number in a particular square. Now we should think a method to remove the same number for the particular column. We can actually make use of the same code, but we just have to amend accordingly. Since nothing to do with each square, so we shouldn't have m and n anymore. We just remove. And we have altogether 9 rows and 9 columns. So we should check for each column and each row. So which means that we shouldn't take a step of 3. Then for this case, the range should change. If let's say we want to check for each column, which means that the number of rows is already fixed. For each column, there will be altogether 9 rows. We just have to check for the column. So the different column, then we run accordingly. So different column, we check for the same column from the first number in the row to the last number in the row. So we have, and this one will be the current one, which is I and 12 plus j. And we again more than one, then we should remove. So I and then 12 plus j, the current one. Nothing to do with m and n for this case. So this is the one that we can help us to remove the repeated number for each column. And now we should copy and paste to change for the row. Since if let's say we deal with column and we fix row, now we deal with row, so we fix column. Column, as we can see, we start from column 13 to 21. So we should fix 13 to 21. So we change row to I. And then we can also change j to I since we want to check for each number in the particular row. Then I, j. So this is very important. The sequence is very important. Okay, so this is the one that for us to check for columns, and this is the one for us to check for the rows. Then we're done already, then we should proceed to the next step. As we can see, since starting from this step, we are removing the number without replacing. So what we have to do here is we need to replace for a new number. So when should we replace? Is whenever the number that we have currently is not equal to 81. So the total number that we have. So because altogether we have 9 by 9 cells, which means that altogether we should have 81 numbers. As long as we less than 81 numbers, then we should generate the number again. So worksheet function. This time we will use count because we don't have any condition here. We just have to count for the entire 9 by 9. we can refer back. We start from first to the last. So if we want, we can copy. So we just copy. We don't have to type ourselves. So we paste here. Okay, that is not equal to 81. And we have to run all over again. So to run, inside to insert a new number, then we just make use of this coding that we have to generate the number. We just copy and then we paste. We don't have to type all over again because we just want to generate as long as not equal. Okay, of course, we need another condition here. We cannot simply just fill up all the entire cell again. Otherwise, wasted our energy to remove the number. So what we have to do, if this cell is empty, then only we replace with a new one. If not empty, then we just ignore. If this is empty, then we replace, otherwise ignore. So we start with if. Before we move to the next cell, we should end with if. Okay, so we done another coding to replace a new number. Okay, now we should create some criteria condition for us to run all over again. Of course, we are not going to generate again the number generate again, but we will just remove, replace, remove, replace. So what we have to do here is if we can make use of any dummy, if let's say A is less than or equal to, okay, let's say we want to repeat this step for 100 times. Then we will go to 1. So we make use of this method to refer back a particular line. So we remember the number 1, so go to 1. Where is 1? So let's say we want to repeat starting from this line. So we name this line as 1. So which means that when Excel come to this point, then we will refer back to this line, the line that we noted as 1. Then what we have to do here is we just run all over again. As we can see, how many times we want to run? 100 times, not more than 100. So every time we run this process, we should A equal to A plus 1. Every time we add 1. So run for the first time, then run for the second time until we reach 100 times. So we will keep repeating the process, remove according to each square, each column, each row. Any empty, we replace the number and move all over again until everything done. And let's say we don't want to repeat too many times, we can actually change the number accordingly. So this one is not recommended to put as high, as big as possible, because if let's say we repeat too many times, then it might be time consuming. So I would suggest that to put only 10 times. So suppose that we should use different method. For A, this one, as we can see, we just run all over again, check all over again. So this is basically all over again, which is pretty time consuming. So instead of all over again, so okay, we now create another condition. So L if we have B less than equal to 100, then what we have to do, and with another condition, application dot worksheet function. As say just now, we want to check the sum, the last column, the last 3 column, whether already fixed. So the sum, if let's say the last three column is fixed, which means that the sum should have 135 because each square should have only 45. Since 1 plus until 9, we have total 45. So times 3, we have 135. So we make use of the last three columns. Since we start from column 13, then we just count. We should have range, then sheet 1 dot cells, first row 16 to sheet 1 dot cells, 9 row, then 18. Since we want to make sure that the last three columns we are not going to change anymore, then what we have to do, we just check the middle column is not equal to 135. If not equal to 135, which means that the middle column of the square is still not correct yet. Because for the correct one should be equal to 135. For those that are not correct, definitely is not equal to 135. If not equal, then we want to remove, of course can. Since it's not correct, then we just delete. So every time when we do for this step, we remember to count 1. So b equal to b plus 1. And we should remove. As we can see just now, we remove the first row of the square and the middle column of the square. So the range should be sheet 1 dot cells 4 to 16, 416 to sheet 1 dot cells row number 4 to row number 18. Row number 4 to row number 9 and 16, column 16 to column 18, which is the middle column of the square. Dot clear contained. And we should remove also the first row of the square. So we can copy and we paste. So we change to the first row and the third row, first row to the third row, which is the first row of the square. So we should first row, the entire first row of the square. So we start from 13 to 21. Altogether 9 columns here. And for I equal to 1 to 9, what we have to do, we check, is there any empty cell? For any empty cell, we should remember to replace with a new number. So again, we need to copy this. So check empty, put a new one. Empty, put a new one. Then we have A, we should now set to 0 because now we have a new one. We have a new numbers, which means that we have to go back to step 1 so that we check again for each square any repeated number that we remove. Each column check, each row check. So we have to set A equal to 0. Otherwise, A is already more than 100, then this cannot be done, cannot go back to 1 again. So we have go to 1. So which means that we have to clear, remove, replace, remove, replace for a few times. How many times we want? We want 100. And this 100 will again call another 100 times. So as we can see, it's pretty much lengthy and may be time consuming. So instead of doing so, we can actually use the other method. So we can create another dummy, let's say K. So we replace with k, and we replace with k, so that we know how many times we should have. So for this a, okay, just for the first time when we go back to rerun again, then we maybe like if we have k is equal to, for a we want only 10 times, and then for b maybe like we already run for a few times for b. So if b is more than 0, which means that we already enter the second condition. We already reached b, which means that we just want to change for the first row of the square and the middle column of the square, and we change b to when b is more than 0, which means that we want to change only the first row of square and the middle column of the square, and k equal to 20 times. Else, without reaching this, then it would be purely only for a. Then we take only a 10 times. We can change accordingly. A good combination can speed up the process. Okay, after that, of course, we don't just stop here. As we can see just now, after we already obtain a total of 135, which means that the middle column is already fixed, is already correct. Then we shouldn't change again the middle column. Then what we have to do, we change only the first column of the square. So we need another dummy. So this, instead of using if, we will use else. Then we should start from the latest one. So if we have a, we have b, then now we should have c more than 0. And we have k equal to 100. This one we can run for a long time. We can run for more times because this is only for the first column of the square. The coding here is a bit lengthy, so we have to be patient when write. So what we have here next is to write the code for C. Then else if C less than equal to 50. This one is already the last thing that the Excel should do. So we don't have to run many times. We run for 50 times should be enough. And application dot worksheet, since we just want to change for the first 3 columns, then the rest we are not going to change. Not going to change means what? They're already correct. Already correct since each square is 35. Now we have 6, which means that total should be 270. So we have to check for the sum is it already equal to 270. So we start, since in this tutorial we start from column 13, so which means that in excluded the first 3 columns, then we will have to start from column 16 and to the last one, which is column 21. Sheet 1 dot cells 921 is equal to 270. Then we have, of course, remember to count one by one. Every time we will have to update. So C plus 1. So we know how many times we already done. We shouldn't perform for this method for more than 50 times. So we have range. We just have to clear for the first 3 columns. Cells. So the first row and the first column for this case is column 13 to the third column. So the last row, which is row 9, column 15. dot clear contains. Then again, once we clear, we have to replace. So we just have to copy and then we put it here, paste. So again, we have a new number already, which means that we need to check again. So again, A is equal to 0. And now go back to 1. And we just repeat all the process all over again. Then if let's say until now we still not able to complete, unfortunately, if let's say our luck is damn bad, then what we have to do, we have to start all over again. So which means that A set back to 0, B step back to 0, and C set back to 0. Then what we have to do, we have to start all over again. All over again means what? Means that we go back to the beginning of the code. So start from here, reset everything. So let's say this is 0. Then we have to go to 0. Okay, then we done. So we start with if. So this is the if that we have. So if A is less than K, then what we have to do? Then we do. Okay, if not, then we look for B, look for C, and we start with if. Of course, we end with if. And after that, we have another if outside. So this is the main if. So end with if. So which means that if let's say when we come to this point, we already obtained 81, which means that we don't have to do anything because it's correct already. So we can stop. So no more to run all this here. And we will proceed to choose the level of difficulty, how many numbers should be retained. So we will make use of select case. Or if let's say we want to use the next nested is if also can. Since we already use so many if, then we change a little bit. So we change to select case. For the case level, so let's say the case is, we have, remember, we have EC, we have median, we have difficulty, we have difficult, hard. So we have case is easy, then how many percent should we retain? Okay, maybe we can choose to retain for 0.5%. We can retain a 45% of numbers. Others we just remove. Then case is equal to medium. So for medium, we can choose to, for example, retain 35%. And then case else, which means that it's hard. So the median is using capital. Case else, the level that we should have is 0.25. So every time we drop 10%, and select. We can run and check, see whether fulfill our level of difficulty or not. If not, we can change accordingly. So this is not fixed. We can change according to our preference. Okay, then what we have here, we can now check for what we should retain. So what we have to do here, we have to check for I equal to 1 to 9. Now is the number that should transfer to the correct parser for the user. So for I and for j again, equal to 1 to 9. So sheet 1.cells ij dot log equal to true. So remember, we want to protect the sheet. So which means that if let's say this particular cell, the user shouldn't change anything, then we have to lock. If let's say unlock, then the user able to change, although this is the question. Then sheet one dot cell, as we can see just now, we have color cell. So remember to unfill. Okay, remove the color. So let's say we don't know how to, what is the syntax, we can ignore the I and J first, and we straight away put dot. So interior, the color, dot color. So this is the suggestion. If let's say we straight away put I and J, then Excel is not able to suggest anything here. So this is a trick that we can learn. Dot pattern. We want to remove the color, so we just use interior pattern, then XL none, no color at all. Okay, so what we have to do next, if the random number is less than, we simply let the Excel to generate. If let's say it's less than the level of difficulty that we stated here, then we have to retain the number. So sheet one dot cells ij is equal to, refer to the solution that we have, sheet one dot cells I, then 12 plus j. Then what to do with this one? Of course, we need to fill up with color. So sheet one dot cell, for this case, I use gray color here. So dot interior dot color equal to RGB 188. We can change the color accordingly. And we have to start with if, and we end with if. Before we end, of course, not all the time we need to do this. If let's say the random number that we generated is more than, which means that we shouldn't retain the number. So we have else. What we have to do, we have to allow the user to write the number, write the answer. So which means that we have to make sure it's not locked. If let's say it's locked, then when we protect, user not able to change anything. So we unlock it. We start with if and we end with if. If let's say we do only this, we have to bear in mind that if let's say we are so lucky, every time we get a number that is less than the percentage that we set, then too many number is retained. Then what we have to do, we make use another condition. And so what we have to do here is we make use of the counting function. So what we have to do here is, before we move on, if let's say it's not retained, before we move on the one that not retained, we should make use of the count. So we can use any random dummy that we like. So this one, if let's say we enter here, so we already retain one number, and we enter for the second time, retain two number. What we have to do here is we have to make sure that the number that we retain shouldn't be more than the number according to the level of difficulty. So altogether we have 81. Then we times the percentage, we shouldn't have more than the number that we should have, we decided. So we end with if done already, then which means that we already checked for the first one, then we should go to the next one. So next J and next I. After everything completed, remember to tell the user that the parcel is now ready. So sheet 1.cell, just now we put in row 10, column 1. For the statement, the parcel is generating. Now we change to the parcel is ready. And remember to protect. Protect and give password. Make sure it's consistent with the password that we used previously. So password 123, then end with 123, so that when Excel protect and unprotect is easier. We wouldn't have any error. So this is the process to generate a complete set of puzzle. Remember, let's say we want to use back the same dummy. As we can see, we used A previously as well. What we have to do here is we have to reset A. Otherwise, A is always the last number that we stop here. So we reset A to 0. So this is already done for the coding part. Now we move back to Excel. So to choose whether you want to show answer or hide answer, we can create a button, then we just double click and write the code in it. What we have to do here, we just use the columns. What happened? Columns, we have columns M to U. So columns M to U, then we choose the entire column. Then what I have to do? Hide. So hidden equal to true. However, let's say we want to allow the user to unhide as well, so we can make use of the if function. So if the command button, so if command button to dot caption is equal to show answer, then we have to unhide. So we have to change to false. Once changed to false, already show, which means that we can ask the user whether want to hide back. Then we can change the command button, the caption, to hide answer. Else, just copy and paste here. We change to through and show answer. Start with if, we end with if, then we done. Okay, let's check. So we have the design mode removed and we click. So now we should have hide, show, hide, show. Remember, just now we put a code for protect. So we remember to unprotect. So sheet 1 dot unprotect equal to the password 123. Remember, every time we need to protect. So we have protect 123. So we check again. So show, as we can see, we cannot change anything, we cannot unhide since already protected. Then we click, okay, click, click. Okay, that's all for this video. Thanks for watching. Hope you liked it. See you.